good, y'all? It's the boy Jozy Santino back with another video, and in this video I'm gonna show you how to make a beat for NBA YoungBoy. So yeah, let's start the video. Alright, so I started with the piano, so I used the addictive keys and Studio Grand preset. Alright, so this is the melody for the piano. You can see it here. So now let me explain what I did here. So I started with C sharp minor chord, and then I moved to G sharp minor chord, and then I moved to A major chord. And after that, what I did was like I added the top note. So now it is a 7 chord, and then I also added the 7th note here. So now this is G sharp minor 7 chord, and then I added a top note here as well, just to make the chords feel a little bit more full. And then after that I added bass notes, you can see here, and again I added bass notes again 1 octave down, just to make it more fat. And then after that I added the top notes. So these are the top notes. So for the effects, I started with Valhalla Vintage Verb, I played with decay, and I played with the mix, and this is the vocal air preset. Secondly, I used Sound Toys effect rack, and I used this analog chorus preset. And then also I turned this wet knob to like 48%. And finally I used EQ, cutting a little bit of low, boosting a little bit of the low mid, and boosting a little bit of the high mid. So the piano by itself sounds something like this. Alright, the next sound is again addictive keys. Now this one is called the Mark 1 Dim Dull preset. So what I did was I just copied and pasted the same melody from my previous piano. So for the effects, I started with an EQ, cutting the lows and cutting a little bit of the highs. Then I added Valhalla Vintage Verb. I played with the mix and played with the decay. And after that I added this mid-side matrix, boosting the size. And after that I added this effect rack, and I added this preset under the delay. And then I used the saber box. So I use this preset, and length is like 1/4 and mix is like 44%. I use also the pan, and I use this preset, and length is like 1 bar and mix is 70%. And finally I used an EQ, cutting the lows and cutting the highs. So let's hear this sound by itself. So the next sound that I used was Scarby Rickenbacker bass, and I like this bass. It's really good, it's very good. So for the effects, I started with Camel Crusher. I used this preset, and my wet knob is like 12%. And secondly, I used an EQ, boosting a little bit of the lows and cutting the highs. And so for the bass, I just copied the bass notes, but I added these extra notes here. So yeah, let's hear the bass sound by itself. Alright, so the next sound that I used is Omnisphere. I used this bluesy lead preset under the guitar section. So these are the notes for the guitar. So I use this guitar like, an extra layer of top melody. So for the effects, I used Fruity Compressor, just to gain a little bit of volume, and also, make it sound a little bit punchy. The next effect that I have is an EQ, cutting a little bit of the lows and cutting a little bit of the highs. And next I have Valhalla Vintage Verb. Again, I use this vocal air preset, mix is like 25% and decay is like 2.4. So next we have Saber Box. So I used this sidechain thing here. I used this preset. I used length like 1 bar, and mix is like 20%, so it's not that much, it's just doing a little, And next in the Saber box, I also used this pan thing here. I used this preset, and mix is like 55% and length is like 1 bar. And finally I have an EQ, cutting a little bit of the lows and cutting a little bit of the highs. So let's hear this guitar melody by itself. So the next sound that I used is Mellotron. So this is like a pad sound, this preset. So here on this pad sound, I just copied the chord progression here. And what I also did was like I rendered this to an audio because it was taking too much of CPU. So yeah, so I rendered that pad sound to audio here, you know. So for the effects, I started with an EQ. I did a little bit of low cut and a little bit of like, you know, high cut. I'm cutting the highs as well. And then I used Valhalla Vintage Verb. I played with the mix and played with the decay. And next I used Effect Rack. I used this big white doubler preset. And lastly, I used this Saper box. I'm using this pan thing here, and this preset length is like 1 bar and mix is like 50%. So let's hear this pad sound by itself. So the next sound that I used was a wah sound from a sample pack, which sounds something like this. So yeah, I played with the pitch, so I pitched it down like 800 cents because I wanted it to match with my melody, so that's why I did that. So for the effects, I just have an EQ, you know, cutting the lows and cutting the highs because I wanted it to be, you know, sitting more on like background, so that's why I did that. And after that, I added this vocal runs plugin, and this plugin is great for, you know, vocal chops, but you have to, you know, play with the sounds, you know, find the right sound, you know. So after playing for a while, I came up with this vocal chop. So I use two vocal run plugin. So for the first one, these are the notes, and for the second one, I have this note and this note. So for the effects, I have mid-side matrix boosting the sides, and finally I have an EQ cutting the lows and cutting the highs. And finally I have this ambient sound which is from a sample pack. I'll just let you hear a little bit. So for the ambient sound, I just used an EQ, cutting a little bit of the lows and cutting a little bit of the highs. So after that, what I did was I started arranging my melody loop, and I also added these individual sounds so that if a producer uses my loop, then that producer can also have stems. And then I rendered this to a wave audio file, and again I linked the loop to a mixer track. So for the effects, I added this RC20, and I added this vinyl 1 preset, and I played with the noise, wobble and distort. Secondly, I have FabFilter Pro L just to control the peaks, you know. And then finally I started adding the master effects. So for the master effects, I started with Good Hertz Lossy, and I played with these settings and also these settings. And then I added an EQ, so these are my settings, and I added another EQ, and these are the settings for this one, you know, cutting the highs a bit. And again I added another EQ. I used this preset just to cut all the unwanted frequencies, you know. And finally I added Pro L just to, you know, make the loop loud. And then after that I exported this whole sample or loop again. So now I'm gonna explain how I made my drums in the new project. Alright, so now I'm gonna let you hear the drum loop. Alright, so I started with claps, then I added this hi-hat, then I added this 808 and kick, then I added this snare and perk sounds, and finally I added this transition effect sound, which sounds something like this. So yeah guys, that's it for today. I hope you liked this video. Please hit the like button and subscribe button, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Jozy_Santino. So yeah guys, see you in the next video.